And a lot of the technique for creating title sequences at that time was optical printer. So I was trying to see if maybe we could get a hold of him. And oddly enough, it just so happened that he was scheduled to come to our studio for some reason and do like a talk on title sequences. And it was like the weirdest crossing of paths that I just happened to be looking at him. I even sent our creative director and producer like, hey, can we get in contact with Dan and see if he can help us with this? And then a couple days later, they're like, oh, he's actually coming to the studio so we could talk to him. And so he did come to the studio, and he came over to my desk, sat down, and I showed him what we were working on. And I said, look, we're inspired by a lot of the titles that were done in the 80s. And what we really want to make is something that looks authentic to that time period. And so, we were trying to think of wanting to do it optically, like with an optical printer and stuff, and trying to get ideas about what we could do to try to make this as authentic as possible, because this is somebody that was making title sequences during that time. And so he was using optical printers. He was filming these things out on film. It was interesting because he's saying what they were trying to do was they were trying to make their titles look as clean and pristine as possible, almost like what a digital title would look like today. Perfectly clean edges. Nothing is like moving or shaking or any of that kind of stuff. But they would have to film their titles over and over and over again, because you might get a bump in the camera or something slightly out of focus, or the animation just wasn't as smooth, or something just wasn't working right. And there was just so many like orchestrated pieces that had to work together. And especially when you're doing something on film, it's unpredictable about how it's going to develop and turn out. But we wanted to go back and try to bring in some of those imperfections. And his advice was sort of like to take this tool that we have with digital technology and then just incorporate all the things that we want to bring back from the era of doing things practically on film. But it was also great because I was able to ask him questions about like, what were some of the things that were happening when you're trying to film these out practically that you were trying to avoid, like that you had to film over and over again for. And there were so many different ideas in mentioning, but one was that when you are dissolving two shots together, the first frame of that cross dissolve, when two shots are blending together, you might get a pop in the exposure, because the first time that those two pieces of film are being joined together, the exposure is doubling up. And so you're having to sort of animate this by hand, but there's no way to get it exactly perfect. You're sort of just guessing as it's animating through the dissolve. So that's something that we incorporated into the sequence. And it was so cool talking to him. Like, I'm a huge fan of Star Wars. So to be sitting there talking to the guy that designed the Star Wars title and animated it, and having him sitting next to me looking at something that I'm working on, was like such a cool, surreal moment.